She was 9 months pregnant when her billionaire husband grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the door. Her water had just broken on the marble floor of their $40 million penthouse. She was screaming, begging him to take her to the hospital. Their baby was coming. Instead, he threw her into a back alley in the middle of January and slammed the door shut. She crawled on the frozen sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, crying for help. A woman in fur walked past her. A man in a suit stepped over her body. A couple looked at her and kept walking. She was about to give birth alone on the street. She was about to die. And then a stranger in a worn jacket appeared out of nowhere. He was not rich. He was not powerful. He owned nothing but a small food truck and $800 to his name. But what he did next would cost him everything he had. And 9 years later, when that billionaire came back demanding his son, he had no idea what was waiting for him. He thought he could destroy her twice. He thought money could buy him anything. He was dead wrong. This is the story of how a woman who lost everything found the strength to fight back. How a stranger's kindness changed 2 lives forever. And how a billionaire learned that some things money cannot buy. Stay with me until the end, because the twist at the 9-year mark will leave you speechless. Lesson and value. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. This story is not just entertainment. It carries a message that every woman needs to hear. Your worth is not measured by your bank account. Your strength is not determined by your circumstances. And sometimes the person who saves your life is not the one with millions in the bank. It is the one with love in their heart. If you have ever felt alone, abandoned, or powerless, this story is for you. If you have ever wondered whether good people still exist in this world, this story will answer that question. And if you have ever doubted whether you could survive the worst moment of your life, listen closely, because Elena did. And so can you. Meaning of the story. This story teaches us 3 powerful truths. First, money without love is meaningless. Marcus Sterling had $40 million, but lived in misery. Danny Reeves had almost nothing but built a life filled with joy. Second, the people who step over you when you are down do not define your future. The people who stop to help you do. One stranger with a kind heart can change everything. Third, and most importantly, you are never too broken to rebuild. Elena lost her marriage, her home, her job, and almost her life. But she found something more valuable than anything Marcus could have given her. She found herself. The moment my water broke on the marble floor of our $40 million penthouse, my husband looked at me like I was a stain he needed to remove. I remember every detail of that night. The way the chandelier light caught the puddle spreading beneath my feet. The way Marcus's jaw tightened with disgust rather than concern. The way my hands trembled as I clutched my swollen belly, feeling our baby shift inside me. Ready to enter a world that was about to become very cold. I did not know that in exactly 17 minutes, I would be bleeding on a Manhattan sidewalk, watching the father of my child close the door on our life forever. But here is what he did not know. That baby he threw away would one day stand in front of him and destroy everything he built. Let me tell you how I got here. My name is Elena Mitchell. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where my father worked at the local hardware store and my mother taught 3rd grade until cancer took her when I was 23. I worked my way through the nursing school while caring for her during those final years, learning that love sometimes means holding someone's hand while they slip away from you. After she passed, I moved to New York City with $800 and a nursing degree. I got a job at Mount Sinai Hospital, working double shifts in the emergency room, learning that the city could be brutal but also beautiful if you knew where to look. I was 28 years old when Marcus Sterling III walked into my life. It was a Tuesday night, and I was 16 hours into an 18-hour shift when the paramedics rushed in with a car accident victim. Minor injuries, they said, but he was making a scene, demanding a private room, threatening to sue everyone in sight. I walked into the trauma bay and saw him for the first time. Dark hair, sharp jaw, expensive watch that probably cost more than my annual salary. He was yelling at a resident who looked ready to cry. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded. I stepped forward with my suture kit, someone who needs stitches and apparently a lesson in patience. "Now hold still, or I will make this hurt more than necessary." He stared at me like no one had ever spoken to him that way, which I would later learn was probably true. "Did you just threaten a billionaire?" he asked. I threaded my needle without looking up. I threatened a patient who will not stop moving. "The billionaire part is irrelevant to my needle." He laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I had heard from him, though I did not know it at the time. Later, he would tell me that was the moment he decided he had to have me. I should have recognized the word he used. Have. Not know, not love. Have. Like I was something to acquire. The next day, 3 dozen roses arrived at the nurse's station with a card that simply said, "Dinner?" and a phone number. I threw them away. I was allergic to roses, and I did not date patients. The day after that, a box of imported chocolates appeared. I gave them to the other nurses. The day after that, Marcus Sterling himself walked into the emergency room wearing a suit that cost more than my rent. "You are a very difficult woman to impress," he said. "I am a very busy woman who does not have time for games," I replied. "Then let me be direct. Have dinner with me. One dinner. If you hate it, I will never bother you again." My mother used to say, "Watch how a man treats waiters, nurses, and people who can do nothing for him. That is who he really is." I should have watched more carefully that first night in the hospital. I should have remembered how he spoke to that young resident. But I was tired and lonely, and he was charming when he wanted to be. So, I said yes. 1 dinner became 2. 2 became 20. Marcus Sterling pursued me with the same intensity he brought to his business deals, and I was swept up in a whirlwind I did not understand. He took me to restaurants where the menus had no prices. He flew me to Paris for the weekend on his private jet. He listened when I talked about my mother, about nursing school, about my dreams of opening a clinic for low-income families someday. He made me feel seen in a way I had not felt since my mother died. But there were warning signs I chose to ignore. The way he dismissed my nursing career as cute when I mentioned working late. The way he got irritated when my shifts ran long and I had to cancel plans. The way he never, not once in 8 months of dating, introduced me to his family. When I finally asked about meeting his mother, Marcus's face changed. "She is complicated," he said. "Let us wait until things are more serious." I did not know then that his mother, Victoria Sterling, had already hired a private investigator to compile a dossier on me. I did not know that she had declared me a gold-digging opportunist before we ever met. I did not know that she was already planning how to destroy me. After 8 months, Marcus proposed with a 15-carat diamond ring on the observation deck of the Empire State Building. I said yes because I loved him, or thought I did. I said yes because I was alone in the world and he offered me a family. I said yes because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. My mother was gone. My father had remarried and moved to Florida with a woman who made it clear I was not welcome in their new life. I had no siblings, no close friends in the city. Marcus was offering me belonging. The wedding was a massive society event, 300 guests, a 12-tier cake, coverage in the New York Times. I wore a dress that cost more than my nursing school tuition and walked down an aisle lined with white orchids. But even on my wedding day, The cracks were showing. Victoria Sterling did not smile once during the ceremony. I caught her whispering to other guests, who then looked at me with something between pity and contempt. Marcus seemed nervous around his mother, constantly seeking her approval rather than enjoying our day. During the reception, I excused myself to use the restroom. Victoria followed me. She cornered me by the sinks, her diamonds glittering under the fluorescent lights. "Enjoy this while it lasts, dear," she said. "My son collects pretty things, but he always gets bored, and when he does, you will leave with exactly what you came with. Nothing." I told myself it was jealousy. I told myself she would come around once she got to know me. I told myself that love would be enough. I was wrong about everything. The first year of my marriage taught me that a gilded cage is still a cage. On the surface, my life looked perfect. I lived in a $40 million penthouse on the Upper East Side with views of Central Park. I had a closet full of designer clothes, a housekeeper who came every day, and a black American Express card with no limit. But beneath the surface, I was drowning. Victoria visited constantly. She criticized everything about me. My cooking was too simple, she said, even though Marcus had claimed to love my pot roast when we were dating. My clothes were wrong. My accent was common. My background was embarrassing. She accidentally mentioned Marcus's ex-girlfriends at every opportunity. All of them were society women with pedigrees and trust funds. All of them were everything. I was not, and Marcus, the man who had pursued me so relentlessly, began to change. At 3 months, he suggested I quit nursing. "You do not need to work anymore," he said. "I can give you everything." At 6 months, he insisted. "It is embarrassing, Elena. My wife cleaning bedpans. What will people think?" I should have fought harder. I should have recognized that my job was the only thing keeping me connected to who I was. But I wanted to make him happy. I wanted to prove Victoria wrong about me. I wanted to be a good wife, so I quit. By 9 months into our marriage, I had no income, no friends in Marcus's world, and no access to money except what he chose to give me. The checking account he set up for my expenses required his approval for any purchase over $500. I could not buy groceries without his permission. Here's the truth nobody tells you. When someone asks you to give up your independence, they are not building a partnership. They are building a cage. Keep your job, keep your friends, keep your bank account. Love should not cost you yourself. I wish I had known that then. Then I discovered I was pregnant. I found out on a Tuesday morning, staring at the positive test in our marble bathroom. For a moment, I felt hope bloom in my chest. A baby. Our baby. Maybe this would bring us closer together. Maybe this would help Marcus see me as his partner, his family, not just another possession. I prepared his favorite meal that night. I wore a dress he liked. I practiced how I would tell him, imagining his face lighting up with joy. When Marcus came home, I took his hand and placed it on my stomach. "We are going to have a baby," I said. His reaction was not joy. His face went cold, then angry. "Are you sure it is mine?" he asked. I felt like I had been slapped. "Of course it is yours. How could you even ask that?" He pulled his hand away. "My mother warned me you would do this. She said you would trap me with a baby." I showed him the timeline, the doctor's confirmation. He seemed to accept it, but something had broken between us. He called Victoria immediately. Stepping into his study and closing the door, I pressed my ear against the wood and heard her voice through the phone. "I told you she would try to trap you. Get a paternity test the moment it is born. And Marcus, remember what the prenup says." That night, I cried alone in the bathroom of our $40 million penthouse. I was pregnant, alone in a hostile world, married to a man who did not trust me, controlled by a mother-in-law who hated me. The bathroom had heated floors and a tub that cost $15,000. It felt like a tomb. From that day forward, Marcus treated me like a stranger. He moved to a separate bedroom. He came home late, sometimes smelling of perfume. He stopped looking at me altogether. At a charity gala when I was 7 months pregnant, he brought another woman. Her name was Brittany. She was blonde and thin and laughed at everything he said. He introduced me to his colleagues as my wife with audible disdain. Victoria made sure I heard her at that gala, speaking loudly to a circle of society women. Poor thing got pregnant on purpose, you know. The oldest trick in the book. My son is too kind to throw her out, but once the paternity test proves what we all suspect, I confronted Marcus in the car on the way home. Did you hear what your mother said about me? His answer still echoes in my mind. Maybe if you acted more like you belonged here, she would not have to say things like that. I spent the last 2 months of my pregnancy alone in that penthouse, talking to my unborn baby, promising him that I would love him enough for both parents. I told him about his grandmother, my mother, and how she would have adored him. I told him about Ohio, about fireflies and county fairs, and the way the corn grew tall in summer. I told him we would be okay, even though I did not believe it. The day everything shattered, I was 9 months pregnant and Marcus came home early. He was drunk and furious. His company had lost a $200 million deal because a competitor had leaked information. He blamed me. "This is your fault," he said. "How could this possibly be my fault? I do not even know about your deals. Everything went wrong when you came into my life. My mother was right about you." That was when my water broke on the marble floor. I remember the look of disgust on his face as he stared at the puddle spreading beneath me. I remember clutching my stomach as the first contraction hit. I remember the fear and the pain and the desperate hope that this nightmare was just a bad dream. "Marcus," I gasped, "the baby. It is coming. We need to go to the hospital now." He did not call for help. He did not reach for his phone to dial 911. Instead, he grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the private elevator. "Please," I begged. "Marcus, please, our baby." He pushed me into the elevator, rode down with me in silence, and then shoved me out the service entrance into the back alley. "Go back to whatever gutter you crawled out of," he said, "and do not ever come back." The door closed. I was alone in a Manhattan alley, in labor, in January, with nothing but the clothes on my back. The cold hit me first. January in New York is brutal, even when you are healthy and dressed for it. I was neither. I was in a thin maternity dress, my feet in house slippers, my body racked with contractions that were coming faster and closer together. I tried to stand. I could not. The pain was too intense, radiating from my lower back through my entire body. I managed to get to my hands and knees on the frozen concrete. The alley was dark and empty. Dumpsters lined one wall. The service entrance Marcus had thrown me from was locked. The only way out was toward the street, maybe 50 feet away. I began to crawl. Every few feet, a contraction would seize me, and I would collapse, pressing my forehead against the filthy ground, breathing through the pain the way they taught us in the childbirth class I had attended alone, because Marcus could not be bothered. I tried to scream for help. My voice came out as a whisper, then a moan. The wind swallowed whatever sound I made. I do not know how long it took me to reach the street. It felt like hours. It was probably 15 minutes. When I finally crawled onto the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, I looked up and saw people walking past. Hope surged through me. Someone would help. Someone would see a pregnant woman crawling on the ground and stop. The first person to notice me was a woman in a fur coat. She looked down, clutched her purse tighter, and walked faster in the opposite direction. The second was a man in a business suit, talking loudly on his phone. He literally stepped over me like I was trash on the sidewalk. The third was a couple. The woman tugged on the man's arm and said we should help. The man shook his head and pulled her away. "Not our problem," I heard him say. "I want you to really think about that. I was a pregnant woman, clearly in distress, crawling on one of the richest streets in America. And person after person looked at me and decided I was not their problem. I think about this sometimes when I see how we treat each other, how easy it is to look away from suffering when stopping might inconvenience us, how we convince ourselves that someone else will handle it, that it is not our responsibility, that the person probably deserves whatever is happening to them. No one deserves to crawl alone on a cold sidewalk while their baby is coming." I collapsed on my back, staring up at the night sky. The contractions were almost constant now. I could feel the baby moving down, ready to be born, and I knew I was going to deliver right there on the street. I am going to die here, I thought. My baby is going to die here, and no one cares. I started to pray, not for myself, for my baby. "Please," I begged, whatever power might be listening, "please save my child. I do not care what happens to me, but please save my baby." A car slowed down, and I felt a flicker of hope. But when the driver saw me, saw my condition, he sped away without stopping. I closed my eyes and prepared to die. That was when I heard the sound of footsteps running toward me instead of away. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" I opened my eyes and saw a man kneeling beside me. He was wearing jeans and a worn jacket. His hands were rough and calloused as he touched my forehead, checking for fever. "The baby," I managed to say. "The baby is coming." His face changed. Okay, we are going to get you help." "Can you move at all?" "I do not think so." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. I heard him explaining the situation, heard him give the cross streets, heard him ask how long. 20 minutes, he said when he hung up. 20 minutes minimum. They are backed up tonight. 20 minutes. My baby could not wait 20 minutes. The man seemed to understand this. He looked around, then made a decision. "My truck is right there," he said, pointing to a food truck parked in a lot across the street. "I am going to carry you. It is going to hurt, and I am sorry, but we need to get you to a hospital now." He did not wait for my answer. He scooped me up like I weighed nothing, cradling me against his chest. I screamed as the movement triggered another contraction. "I know," he said. "I know. I am sorry. Just hold on." He ran across the street with me in his arms, then laid me gently in the back of his food truck among bags of potatoes and crates of onions. The smell of cooking oil and spices surrounded me. "What is your name?" he asked as he climbed into the driver's seat. "Elena. I am Danny. Danny Reeves. We are going to get through this, Elena. Just keep breathing." He pulled out of the lot and drove like a man possessed, running red lights, laying on the horn, weaving through traffic. I heard other drivers cursing at him. He did not slow down. "Why?" I gasped during a brief break between contractions. "Why are you helping me?" His answer was simple. "Because you need help. That is enough reason. I do not even know you." His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "I know you are a person. I know you are hurting. Everything else can wait. My wife used to say you can tell everything about a society by how it treats people in their worst moments. Some people step over you. Some people step up," his wife used to say. Later, I would learn that Danny Reeves had lost his wife to cancer 2 years before, that he had been a Marine before opening his food truck, that he had spent the last 24 months working 18-hour days trying to outrun his grief. But in that moment, all I knew was that this stranger in a worn jacket was the only person in the world who had chosen to help me. We reached the hospital in 12 minutes. Danny carried me inside, shouting for help. Nurses came running. They took one look at me and rushed me toward the delivery room. "There is a complication," I heard a doctor say. "The baby is in distress. We need to do an emergency cesarean." I grabbed Danny's arm before they wheeled me away. "Do not leave. Please, I do not have anyone else." He squeezed my hand. I am not going anywhere. They took me into surgery. I was alone on the operating table, surrounded by strangers and masks, about to have my baby cut out of me. I thought about Marcus in his penthouse, probably already moving my belongings into storage. I thought about Victoria, triumphant that I was finally gone. I thought about my mother, and how much I wished she was there to hold my hand. And then I heard my baby cry for the first time, and nothing else mattered. His name is Nathan. I chose the name while I was still in recovery, groggy from surgery, and overwhelmed with emotions I could not name. Nathan means gift from God, and that is what he was. A gift. A reason to keep going when everything else had been taken from me. Nathan Daniel Mitchell. I gave him Danny's name as his middle name without asking permission. It seemed right. Danny had given us life. The least I could give him was a name. When I woke up fully, Danny was still there. He was asleep in the hard plastic chair beside my bed, his jacket balled up as a pillow, snoring softly. He had been there all night. I watched him sleep and felt something I had not felt in years. Safety. You saved our lives, I said when he woke up. I do not even know your last name. Reeves, he said, rubbing his eyes. And I did not do anything special, just what anyone should do. No one else did. No one. He did not have an answer for that. The hospital bill was the first obstacle. Emergency cesarean. 2 nights in the hospital. Medications. The total was over $3,200, and I had nothing. Marcus had frozen my credit cards within hours of throwing me out. I had no insurance that was not tied to his name. Danny paid for everything. I found out later what he had sacrificed. He had $847 in his bank account, his entire savings plus that day's earnings. He called his buddy Mike and borrowed $1,000. He called his sister and borrowed $800. He sold his watch, the last gift his wife had given him, to a pawn shop for $600. He sold his dead wife's gift to save a stranger's life. When I tried to thank him, tried to promise I would pay him back someday, he just shook his head. It is a gift, he said. Do not worry about the money. Just focus on that baby. The day I was discharged, I had nowhere to go. I could not go back to Ohio. There was nothing there for me. My father would not take my calls. I had no friends in the city, no family, no money, and a newborn who needed me to figure out how to survive. Danny made me an offer that changed my life. I have a spare room, he said. It is small and kind of a mess, but it is warm and dry. You and Nathan can stay there until you figure out your next step. No pressure, no expectations, just a place to sleep. I should have said no. I had just escaped a man who controlled me. Why would I put myself in that position again? But Danny was not offering control. He was offering a couch, some time, and zero expectations. And sometimes, when you have nothing, you have to trust someone to find out if trust still exists. His apartment was in Queens, a small 2-bedroom in a building with a broken elevator and a super who was never available. Danny's daughter had gone to college the year before, so her room was empty. Empty was a generous word. The room contained his fishing gear, 3 broken lamps, and a treadmill being used as a clothes rack. I was not expecting company, Danny said, his face reddening. I looked around at the chaos and felt something I had not felt in years. I laughed. When is the last time you saw a vegetable? I asked. Does hot sauce count? It is made from peppers. We are going grocery shopping tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. The first months were hard. I was recovering from surgery, caring for a newborn, and trying to rebuild a life from nothing. I filed for divorce from Marcus, though his lawyers made it clear the prenup would leave me with nothing. I worked on getting my nursing license reinstated. Danny helped without being asked. He would take the night feeding so I could sleep. He would walk Nathan around the apartment when he was colicky, singing off-key lullabies. He never complained, never made me feel like a burden. I insisted on paying rent as soon as I started working again. Danny kept secretly putting the money into a savings account for Nathan. I did not find out until years later. Here's what I want you to understand. Do not let any man, no matter how kind, pay for everything. Not because they are bad, but because you need to know you can survive without them. I had been dependent on Marcus, and it nearly killed me. I would never be dependent again. By 6 months, I was working night shifts at a clinic so Danny could watch Nathan during the day. It was exhausting, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned, every patient I helped, every skill I used was proof that I was more than what Marcus had tried to make me. Danny and I fell into a rhythm. He was gruff but kind. I was rebuilding but still scarred. We watched terrible reality TV together after Nathan fell asleep, making fun of the contestants. Why do these people always say they are not here to make friends? Danny asked one night. Where else are they going to find someone who will put up with them? Says the man whose idea of a romantic dinner is Taco Tuesday at the truck. Excuse me, I also have Fish Friday. That is not romantic. That is a menu. He threw a pillow at me. I threw it back. Nathan woke up crying, and we both scrambled to comfort him, bumping into each other in the small hallway, laughing despite everything. I did not know I was falling in love with Danny Reeves. I was too busy surviving to notice. But looking back, I can see the moments adding up. The way he taught Nathan to say truck as his first word. The dinners he left warming in the oven when I worked late. The way he never asked for anything in return. 8 months after the worst night of my life, I realized I was happy. Nathan was healthy and growing. I had been promoted to senior nurse at the clinic. I had saved enough for a deposit on my own apartment. Life was not perfect, but it was mine. One night after putting Nathan to bed, Danny sat beside me on the couch. Elena, he said, I know the timing might be wrong. I know you have been through hell, but I need you to know I am not going anywhere. Whatever you need for as long as you need it. No pressure, no expectations. I am just here. I looked at this man who had given everything to save a stranger. This man who had held my baby while I cried. This man who had asked for nothing and given me everything. I kissed him. It was our first kiss, and it felt like coming home. Maybe, I thought, maybe I can be happy again. The next morning, there was a knock on the door. The process server handed me documents that made my hands shake. Marcus Sterling III was suing for full custody of Nathan. The documents claimed I was an unfit mother, that I had abandoned the marital home, that I was living with a strange man and leaving my child with non-family members while I worked nights, that Nathan would be better off with his father, who could provide stability and resources. His legal team was the most expensive family law firm in New York. They had 4 lawyers assigned to the case. They had private investigators compiling evidence against me. I had nothing. My savings for the apartment deposit became my legal fund. It was not enough. I qualified for legal aid and was assigned a young attorney named Jessica Turner, who was idealistic but had never handled a case this complex. I am going to be honest with you, Jessica said at our first meeting. Marcus Sterling has unlimited resources. He can bury us in paperwork, hire experts to testify against you, drag this out for years. The odds are not in our favor. But we are going to fight anyway, she added, because what he did to you was wrong. And sometimes that has to matter. If you ever face a custody battle, document everything, every expense, every doctor visit, every moment you spend with your child. Keep texts, emails, photos with timestamps. The courts do not care about feelings. They care about evidence. Start building your case before you ever walk into a courtroom. I documented everything. Every diaper change, every feeding, every doctor's appointment. Every story I read to Nathan at bedtime, every song I sang to help him sleep. But Marcus had better documentation, or rather, his lawyers did. They presented photos of my cramped apartment in Queens. They detailed my night shifts, framing them as proof I prioritized work over my child. They hired a psychologist who testified that I showed signs of instability and postpartum depression. The psychologist had never examined me. I did not know until later that Victoria Sterling had paid her $200,000 for her testimony. The first hearing was a disaster. Marcus arrived in a $10,000 suit with 4 lawyers flanking him. I arrived in my best dress from Target with Jessica, who was visibly nervous. Under cross-examination, I fell apart. Is it not true that you chose to work nights leaving your infant son with a man you barely knew? Danny is not. A simple yes or no, Ms. Mitchell. I had to work because your client threw me out with nothing. Yes or no? Yes, yes. I work nights because I have to survive, because your client left me to die on a sidewalk while I was in labor with his child. The judge called for order, but I could see in his eyes that Marcus's lawyers had done their job. They had painted me as unstable, irresponsible, desperate. That night, I held Nathan and cried. I cannot lose you, I whispered to him. You are all I have. I will die before I let him take you. Danny found me like that, rocking Nathan, crying so hard I could barely breathe. He did not say it would be okay. He did not make promises he could not keep. He just sat beside me and put his arm around my shoulders and let me cry until I had nothing left. Then he said something that changed everything. You are not going to win this fight by being a victim. You need to stop playing defense and start playing offense. What do you know about Marcus that he does not want people to know? I thought about the 2 years I had spent in that penthouse, watching and listening, about the things Victoria whispered on the phone, about the sealed lawsuits I had heard Marcus mention to his lawyers. That night, I started digging. Public records are available to anyone who knows where to look. I found that Marcus had been sued twice by former employees. Both cases were sealed with confidentiality agreements, but the records of the lawsuits themselves were still visible. One of those former employees was named Diana Cole. She still lived in New Jersey. I visited her on a Saturday while Danny watched Nathan. Diana was in her 50s with tired eyes and a small house filled with too many cats. She did not want to talk to me at first. The non-disclosure agreement she had signed threatened her with financial ruin if she spoke. But when I told her my story, about being thrown out in labor, about crawling on the sidewalk, about almost dying, something in her face changed. She sat down across from me and started talking. I was his secretary, Diana said, for 3 years. He harassed me constantly, comments about my body, my clothes, touching that I did not want. When I finally threatened to report him to Human Resources, he had me fired for cause, made up some lie about embezzlement. Victoria paid me $500,000 to sign an NDA and disappear. She told me if I ever spoke about what happened, they would destroy me. I believed her. I still believe her. She could not testify. The NDA prevented it. But she told me something that changed the game entirely. You are not the first wife, Diana said. Look into Caroline Ashford. She was married to Marcus for 8 months before you. Victoria made her disappear too. Caroline Ashford lived in Boston now. She had rebuilt her life, remarried, had 2 children. She did not want to talk about Marcus Sterling. But when I told her about Nathan, about the custody battle, about Victoria's campaign to destroy me, Caroline agreed to meet. Her story was identical to mine. She had been swept off her feet, isolated from friends and family, become pregnant. She had been thrown out too, though not while in labor. The stress had caused her to miscarry. Victoria paid me $2 million to sign an NDA and divorce quietly, Caroline said. But she did not just pay me. She threatened me. She said if I did not sign, she would have me committed to a psychiatric institution and take everything I had. Committed? Caroline's hands were shaking. She had me held for 6 months in a private facility, said I was having a mental breakdown. By the time I got out, I had lost my job, my apartment, everything. Signing the NDA was the only way to get my life back. This was not about Nathan. It was never about Nathan. It was about Victoria Sterling controlling her son, destroying any woman who threatened her hold on him. And now I knew how to fight back. The second hearing was different. Jessica Turner presented evidence that the psychologist who had testified against me had been paid $200,000 by Victoria Sterling. She presented Caroline Ashford's testimony, which stunned the courtroom. She presented the pattern of behavior, the sealed lawsuits, the payments to silence accusers. Marcus's lawyers objected to everything, but the damage was done. The judge's face had changed from skepticism to concern. I am deeply troubled by what I have heard today, the judge said. I am ordering a full investigation into Mr. Sterling's background. Until then, custody remains with the mother. Unsupervised visitation for the father is denied. We had won. Or so I thought. That night, Danny and I celebrated. He made steaks on the tiny grill on his fire escape. We toasted with cheap wine and talked about the future. It is over, I said. We won. Danny was more cautious. The investigation is just starting. Men like Marcus do not lose gracefully. I should have listened to him. 2 weeks later, I dropped Nathan at his daycare and went to work. At 2 p.m, I got a call. Mitchell? Nathan's grandfather picked him up. He had authorization. I never added anyone to the pickup list. I know, the director said, sounding confused. But he had a signed authorization form from you. I have it right here. I was at the daycare within 20 minutes. The authorization form they showed me had my signature on it. It was a forgery, a very good forgery, but I knew I had never signed it. Marcus had taken my son. I called the police. They said there was nothing they could do. He is the biological father, ma'am. This is a custody dispute. We cannot intervene. I called Jessica. She said we needed to file an emergency motion, but it would take time. I called Danny. He said he was on his way. For 1 hour, I fell apart completely. I sat in the daycare parking lot on my knees, screaming into the winter air. This could not be happening. After everything I had survived, after crawling on that sidewalk, after fighting so hard to rebuild, Marcus was going to take my son anyway. Then Danny arrived. He knelt beside me in the dirty slush and held me. No, I heard myself say. No more crying. No more begging. No more waiting for the system to save me. I am going to get my son back myself. I went to Marcus's penthouse. Security would not let me in. I caused a scene, demanding to see my child. They called the police. I was arrested for trespassing. Danny bailed me out. I filed an emergency motion. It was denied. The judge who signed it was a golf buddy of Marcus's father. The system was rigged against me. I missed 3 days of work because I was consumed with trying to find Nathan. The clinic had no choice but to let me go. I was unemployed with no income to fund the legal fight. In 3 days, I had been arrested, denied by the court, and lost my job. 3 catastrophes in a row. It would have broken most people. It nearly broke me. But I remembered something my mother told me when she was dying. She said, "Elena, the world will try to break you. It will throw things at you that seem impossible to survive. But you come from strong women. Your grandmother survived the Depression. I survived your father leaving. You will survive whatever comes next." I was going to survive this. If I could not beat Marcus in court, I would beat him in public. I remembered a journalist I had met at the hospital, a woman who covered society scandals for the New York Post. Her name was Rachel Bennett, and she had always seemed interested in stories about powerful men behaving badly. I called her. "I have a story for you," I said, "about a billionaire who throws away wives like garbage and a mother who commits women to psychiatric hospitals to keep them quiet." Rachel listened. Then she said, "I am interested, but I need one more thing. Proof that he does not actually want your son. Proof this is about hurting you, not about being a father." I knew how to get that proof. Through Rachel, I fed a rumor into Marcus's social circle. Elena is about to flee the country with incriminating evidence about the Sterling family. Marcus panicked. I knew he would. He went to his lawyer to discuss strategy. What he did not know was that the legal assistant in that meeting was sympathetic to me. She had read about my story. She had been harassed by a wealthy man once too. She recorded the conversation on her phone. "I do not care about the kid," Marcus said on that recording. "Just make sure Elena does not have him. Make her suffer. My mother wants her destroyed." I had him. Rachel Bennett's article went viral within hours. The headline read, "Billionaire's Pattern of Abuse. 3 women tell their stories." The article included everything. My story of being thrown out in labor, Caroline's story of being committed to a psychiatric institution, Diana's story of harassment and silencing, the recording of Marcus admitting he did not care about Nathan, the evidence of Victoria's payments to witnesses and lawyers. Social media exploded. The hashtag #JusticeFor Elena trended nationally. Women across America shared their own stories of custody battles with wealthy abusers. Marcus's company lost 3 major deals within 48 hours. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors fled. Victoria tried to control the narrative. She held a press conference declaring that her son was the victim, that these women were gold diggers seeking attention. A reporter interrupted her. "Mrs. Sterling, how do you explain the payments to silence these women?" Victoria's face went pale. She said no more questions and walked away from the podium. The empire was crumbling. But the real blow came from Danny's military buddy, a private investigator named Sam, who had been helping us dig into the Sterling family. "Elena," Sam said when he called me, "you need to see what I found." He had uncovered records from the psychiatric facility where Caroline had been held. Records that showed Victoria Sterling had not just threatened to have Caroline committed. She had actually done it, using forged documents, paid doctors, and false testimony to have Caroline declared mentally unfit and held against her will for 6 months. This was not just manipulation. This was criminal. The district attorney opened an investigation. The custody hearing that followed was a rout. Marcus's lawyers had quit. They did not want their names associated with the PR disaster. The evidence of the forged authorization form was presented. Marcus's recorded statement was played for the judge. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice cold with contempt, "you have demonstrated a shocking disregard for this court and for your own child. Custody is hereby granted to the mother. You are ordered to return the child within 24 hours. Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges, including forgery, custodial interference, and perjury." 24 hours later, I was standing in the lobby of a neutral location arranged by the court. Danny was beside me. Jessica was there as legal witness. Marcus walked in, carrying Nathan. My son saw me and reached out his arms. "Mama," he said. "Mama." I took him from Marcus and held him so tight I thought I might crush him. He smelled like unfamiliar soap. Someone else had been bathing my son. Someone else had been putting him to bed. But he was back. He was safe, and I would never let him go again. Marcus stood there, looking smaller than I remembered. The expensive suit could not hide the defeat in his posture. "Elena," he started. "Do not," I said. "Do not speak to me. Do not look at my son. Just walk away and be grateful I am not pressing charges for kidnapping." He walked away. In the weeks that followed, the Sterling Empire collapsed entirely. Victoria was arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, and unlawful restraint. The district attorney had found evidence of everything. She was led away in handcuffs, the society queen reduced to a perp walk on the evening news. Marcus was removed as CEO of his own company. The board voted unanimously. The stock dropped 40%. 3 more women came forward with harassment allegations. But the revelation that shocked me most came from an unexpected source. Danny's military buddy, Sam, had kept digging, even after we won custody. He found something that connected all of us in a way none of us had known. Danny's late wife, Sarah, had been a nurse. She had worked at Mount Sinai Hospital before her diagnosis. The same hospital where I had worked. The same hospital where Marcus had come in after his car accident, years before I met him. Sarah had filed a complaint against Marcus Sterling for inappropriate behavior toward nurses. The complaint had been buried. Victoria had made it disappear. Danny had no idea. When I showed him the documents Sam had found, Danny sat in silence for a long time. "She never told me his name," he finally said. "Just that some rich guy had harassed her and the hospital covered it up. If I had known, I would not have just driven you to the hospital, Elena. I would have driven back and put him through a wall." "Maybe it is better you did not know," I said. "Maybe we were supposed to find each other this way. Through kindness, not revenge." He looked at me. The connection. Sarah, you, Nathan. All of us hurt by the same man, finding each other anyway. "Maybe the universe knows what it is doing sometimes," I said. Danny shook his head. "I do not believe in the universe, but I believe in you, and I believe in us." He kissed me then, and it felt like healing. The years that followed were not easy, but they were ours. Danny and I got married in a small ceremony at the Queen's Courthouse. No 15-carat ring, no 300 guests, just us, Nathan Jessica Turner as our witness, and Danny's daughter, who flew in from college to be there. I wore a dress from a consignment shop. Danny wore the one suit he owned, which was slightly too big in the shoulders. Nathan, who was 2.5, refused to wear the tiny suit I bought him and attended the ceremony in his dinosaur pajamas. It was perfect. We stayed in the apartment in Queens for another year while I went back to school. I got my nurse practitioner license. Danny expanded his food truck business. We saved every penny we could. When Nathan was 4, we bought a small house, 3 bedrooms, a yard, a neighborhood where kids rode bikes in the street, and neighbors brought casseroles when someone was sick. It was nothing like the penthouse on 5th Avenue. It was everything I had ever wanted. I opened my clinic when Nathan was 6. A small practice focused on low-income families who could not afford traditional health care. I hired nurses who reminded me of myself, women who had been through hard times and wanted to help others going through the same. Danny's food truck became food trucks, plural. He had 4 of them by the time Nathan started kindergarten, and he used them to employ veterans transitioning to civilian life. Men and women who had served their country and needed someone to give them a chance. Nathan grew into the kind of child who makes a parent proud. He was smart, but more than that, he was kind. He helped younger kids at school. He volunteered at my clinic on weekends, handing out stickers to scared children waiting to see the doctor. He called Danny Dad from the moment he learned to speak, because Danny was his dad in every way that mattered. I let myself be happy. This is harder than it sounds. After everything I had been through, There was a part of me that kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, kept waiting for Marcus to reappear, for Victoria to somehow escape justice, for my carefully rebuilt life to crumble again. But the shoe never dropped. Victoria Sterling died in prison when Nathan was 7. Heart attack in her cell. She was 72 years old and had refused all visitors, including her son. Marcus had lost everything by then. The company, the penthouse, the money. His lawyers had taken most of it, and the lawsuits from other victims had taken the rest. He lived in a modest apartment in New Jersey, working as a consultant for a small real estate firm that did not know or did not care about his history. I did not feel sorry for him, but I did not feel triumph either. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired of thinking about him. Tired of giving him space in my mind. I focused on what mattered. My husband, my son, my patients, my life. Nathan turned 9 years old on a snowy January day. We threw him a party with his friends from school. Danny made his famous tacos. I made a cake that leaned slightly to the left because I had never learned to bake properly. That night, after the guests had gone home and Nathan was asleep, Danny and I sat on our front porch, watching the snow fall. 9 years, Danny said. 9 years since I found you on that sidewalk. I leaned against his shoulder. Best decision you ever made, stopping that night. Second best. The first was marrying you. That is very romantic for a man whose idea of a date is Taco Tuesday. Excuse me. I also have Fish Friday. I laughed. After everything, after all the pain and fear and loss, I could still laugh. That more than anything was how I knew I had won. Nathan won the citywide academic competition when he was 9.5. It was a math competition held at the largest hotel in the city. Students from every school, public and private, came to compete. Nathan was the only one from a public school to make it to the final round. Danny and I sat in the audience in our best clothes, which were still modest compared to the designer outfits around us. But we did not care. We were there to watch our son shine. And shine he did. The final question was complex, involving concepts most adults would struggle with. The girl competing against Nathan was from the most expensive private school in the city. She answered first. Her answer was wrong. Nathan closed his eyes, thinking. The room held its breath. Then he opened his eyes and gave his answer, explaining his reasoning step by step. The judges checked his work. Then they smiled. Nathan Mitchell wins the competition. The room erupted. Danny and I rushed to the stage, hugging our son, crying and laughing at the same time. Nathan grinned so wide, I thought his face might split. It was one of the happiest moments of my life, which is why I did not notice at first the man standing at the back of the room. We were leaving the hotel, Nathan between us, holding both our hands, when someone stepped into our path. I looked up and saw Marcus Sterling. He looked older than he should have, smaller. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by something off the rack. His hair was graying. His shoulders were slumped. Elena, he said. Danny. I saw in the paper that Nathan was competing. I just wanted to see him. Danny moved forward immediately. You should go. Please. I know I have no right, but I just want to look at him. That is all. Nathan tugged on my hand. Mom, who is this? I looked at Marcus, at Danny, at my son, who was watching us with curious eyes. Trusting me to explain this stranger who seemed so interested in him. This is someone I used to know, I said. Nathan nodded. Oh, hi. Marcus's voice cracked. Hi, Nathan. I am proud of you. You did amazing up there. Thanks, I guess, Nathan said. With the polite disinterest of a child being addressed by an adult he did not know, he turned to Danny. Dad, can we get ice cream? You bet, buddy, Danny said. He looked at Marcus with a warning in his eyes, then led Nathan toward the exit. I stayed. Marcus and I stood in the hotel lobby, surrounded by strangers, facing each other for the first time in years. "Elena," he said, "I know sorry does not cover it. I know there is nothing I can say that would ever—" "Stop," I said. "Just stop." He closed his mouth. I looked at this man who had once held all the power, who had thrown me away like garbage, who had tried to take my son to hurt me. He was broken now, beaten. Everything he had built, everything his mother had protected, was gone. "I believe you are sorry," I said slowly. "I believe you are suffering. But Marcus, you are not sorry for what you did to me. You are sorry for what happened to you." "There is a difference." He flinched, like I had hit him. "Nathan is happy," I continued. "He is loved. He has a father who would die for him and a mother who already almost did. He does not need you. He does not know you, and that is your own doing. Can I— Is there any way I could— No, not now, maybe not ever, but I will tell you this. If someday Nathan wants to know about you, I will not stop him. That is more than you ever gave me." I turned and walked away. Danny and Nathan were waiting outside. Nathan had already forgotten about the strange man inside. He was telling Danny about the ice cream flavors he wanted to try, listing them with the seriousness of a scientist cataloging specimens. I took Nathan's hand, and Danny put his arm around my shoulders. We walked into the night together. A family. Behind us, I knew Marcus was watching his biological son leave with another man, the man who had earned the title of father through love instead of blood. I did not look back. 6 months later, I received a letter from a law firm. Victoria Sterling had died in prison. I knew this already, but what I did not know was that she had left a will that named Nathan as her sole beneficiary. The amount was approximately $15 million. Victoria's personal fortune, separate from the company that had collapsed, preserved in trusts that the lawsuits could not touch. But there was a condition. Nathan had to spend 1 weekend per month with Marcus until he turned 18. I read the letter 3 times, unable to believe it. The final paragraph read, "Mrs. Sterling wished for you to know that she regretted many things, but not her love for her grandson. She hoped this gift would give him opportunities she never gave you. She also wished for you to know, quote, she was stronger than I thought. She deserved better than my son." I sat with that letter for a long time. Victoria Sterling, the woman who had tried to destroy me, had called me strong, had admitted I deserved better, had left her fortune to the grandson she had never met. I did not know what to feel. That night, I talked to Danny, then to Jessica Turner, who was still my lawyer and friend, then in age-appropriate terms to Nathan himself. Nathan's response surprised me. "Mom," he said, his 9-year-old face serious beyond his years, "if it means I can help other kids, like the ones at your clinic, maybe we should take it." I looked at my son, at this child who had been thrown away before he was even born, who had survived against all odds, who had grown into someone so much better than the man who had fathered him. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is a lot of money. It comes with conditions, with complications." Nathan thought about it. "You always tell me that money is not the most important thing, that being kind matters more. So we can use the money to be kind to lots of people, right?" Danny laughed, his eyes bright with pride. "Kid has a point." I made my decision. I took the money. I put it in a trust for Nathan's education and future, with provisions that a portion would fund scholarships for underprivileged students and expand my clinic's services. I did not agree to the visitation condition. The will could not legally enforce it. Nathan was too young to make that choice himself, and I would not force him into a relationship with a man who had only ever caused pain. But I wrote Marcus a letter. "I am not doing this for you," I wrote. "I am doing this for Nathan, who has more grace at 9 than you have had your entire life. If you want to be part of his life someday, that is his choice. Get therapy. Become someone worth knowing. When Nathan is old enough to decide, I will let him make that choice. Until then, leave us alone. Danny read the letter before I sent it. That was generous, he said. That was for Nathan, not for him. I know. That is what makes it generous. We sent the letter. We established the trust. We expanded the clinic. We funded the scholarships. And we lived. That is the part of the story people do not tell you about. The living. The ordinary days that follow the extraordinary ones. The breakfasts and homework, help, and arguments about bedtime. The holidays and birthdays and lazy Sundays. The slow accumulation of a life well lived. Nathan grew up. He went to college on scholarship because he did not want to use Victoria's money for himself. He went to medical school because he wanted to help people who could not help themselves. He is a doctor now. He works at my clinic 3 days a week and volunteers at a free hospital the rest of the time. He never met Marcus again. His choice, not mine. He said he already had a father and did not need another one. Danny's food truck empire grew to 12 trucks before he retired. He spends his days now coaching Little League and teaching veteran skills programs. He still makes me tacos every Tuesday. I still run the clinic. I am 63 years old and have no plans to stop. There are too many people who need help, too many women crawling on their own cold sidewalks, too many children who deserve a chance. I think about that night sometimes. The marble floor, the alley, the crawl, the stranger in the worn jacket who stopped when no one else would. I used to think my story was a tragedy. A billionaire threw me out in labor. I almost died on a cold sidewalk. I lost everything I thought I had. But here's the thing about tragedies. They are only tragedies if they end badly. Mine did not end in a penthouse. It ended with love. Real love. The kind that shows up with a food truck at the worst moment of your life and never asks for anything in return. So if you are out there, crawling on your own cold sidewalk, wondering if anyone cares, I need you to hear me. Keep going. Keep fighting. Your Danny might be just around the corner. And even if he is not, even if no one comes, you are enough to save yourself, I promise. I know, because I did it. And so can you. Now, if this intro already touched your heart, imagine what the full story will do. I spent countless hours crafting every detail of Elena's journey. Every twist, every tear, every triumph was designed to move you. But here's the thing. Stories like this only reach people who need them when you help spread the word. So if you believe that kindness matters more than money, hit that like button. If you know someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they think, share this video with them. And if you want more stories that remind you what truly matters in life, subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below telling me, have you ever met a stranger who changed your life? I read every single comment, and your story might inspire someone else who is struggling right now. Now let us begin Elena's journey from the very beginning. Closing statement: this content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every word was crafted with purpose. Every scene was designed to inspire. Thank you for being part of our community. Your support helps us continue creating stories that matter. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know.